and the moon shall turn to blood before the great and notable day of the Lord. Genesis 1:14 said God is using the sun, moon, and stars to send signals to mankind. Evidence is very clear scripturally that God controls the sun, the moon, and the stars, that God is sending us a signal through the sun, the moon, and the stars. The question is, are we listening?
At least 60 people are reported dead in wildfires raging outside of the capital of Greece. A pair of large fires is burning in coastal areas near Athens. Some tourists and residents were forced to flee to the beach for safety. Rescue crews from across Europe are racing to Greece to help. Gale force winds and dry conditions are fueling these flames. This is the deadliest fire season to hit Greece in more than a decade. Seth Doan has the latest.
Good morning. Greece has issued an urgent appeal for help in battling the worst fires they've seen there since 2007. A wildfire tore through a beach resort community popular with tourists and retirees. The Coast Guard and passing boats reported picking up around 700 people who had fled to beaches for safety. But tragically, the fire swept through too quickly for others to save themselves, and in some cases, families reportedly trapped behind a wall of fire and smoke. Rescue crews reported finding more than 20 people huddled together on a beach, and the Red Cross told local media that some had apparently been family members who were found hugging each other. The fire was ignited on Monday, but winds died down a bit today, offering some relief, but the fire is not yet under control.
An avalanche of flame driven by high winds swept through these houses at terrifying speed. Nothing was left behind. For many of the victims, there was simply no escape. A local mayor said he saw at least 100 homes and 200 vehicles on fire. Some left it until the very last minute to leave, hoping against hope that their homes would be spared. But for the overstretched fire crews, this was an almost impossible battle. Many people simply fled to the sea. The Coast Guard rescued almost 700 from nearby beaches. Others were rescued from small boats offshore.
Thankfully, the sea was there, and we went into the sea because the flames were chasing us all the way to the water. It burnt our backs, and we jumped into the water.
It was lightning fast. We didn't realise what had happened. You couldn't. It was the first time I've ever seen something like this.
For others, trying to flee in a car proved a fatal mistake. Flames fanned across roads, leaving them trapped and helpless. The Prime Minister cut short a foreign visit to deal with the crisis, arriving ashen-faced for a briefing.
We must, at this moment, all be in a constant state of alert. We must be unified and make the effort to face an exceptionally difficult situation for the country.
Daylight revealed the inferno still pushing through the landscape. Flames lapping the sides of this coastal highway near Athens. Wildfires are not unusual in Greece, but these high winds after a dry winter have created a tinderbox, and it's these resort areas which are taking the brunt of it.
It's a very green area where many Athenians have their summer homes. Many people, including families with children who are now on school holidays, were at their summer homes at the time. And this partly explains the number of dead and the number of injured.
Emergency crews are trying to keep the flames back while also making grim new discoveries, including a group of 26 huddled together, all overcome by smoke, children among them. As this fire rages on, it promises to bring yet more of these apocalyptic scenes with it. This summer holiday season has become a national tragedy.
Higher than normal temperatures ravage much of Europe and the world. The consequences of the hot weather are starting to show their effects. Now, in Japan, record high temperatures have seen dozens of deaths as thermometers have been 12 degrees hotter than the seasonal average. Disaster management agencies are urging people to stay inside as people pour water over pavements in an attempt to cool the streets. And in the UK, formerly green fields have turned to beige as there has been no rain in some places for 54 consecutive days. The country, internationally famed for its rainfall and inconsistent summers, heated up to 33 degrees this week, and temperatures are predicted to rise. Parts of the country have introduced a ban on hosepipe use amid Britain's longest heat wave in 42 years. And in Sweden, the hottest summer for 260 years has seen over 25,000 hectares worth of wildfires burn across the country. That's including in the normally mild Arctic Circle. Swedish authorities have called in help from across Europe, with Norway and Italy sending firefighting teams to tackle the blaze amid the longest drought in 74 years. Well, temperatures are reaching record highs across the planet, from Japan to Sweden, as we just told you, and the effects being felt in the form of wildfires, droughts, and much more. Well, joining us to get a handle on the climate science behind all this is senior scientist Freya Vanberg from the European Union's Earth Observation Program. Copernicus, Freya, thank you for joining us. We just saw there a lot of record numbers across Europe and around the world. How do these fit into the bigger picture of climate change? How do we discuss this, put it in context?
Well, first of all, as I'm sure you've heard many times before, just having one event, you can't link that straight away to climate change without doing further analysis. And since these events are ongoing, this analysis is still outstanding. It will have to be done post-event. And even post-event, we might not be able to say clearly whether this is related to climate change or not. What we do expect, of course, is with climate change for these kind of heatwave events to become to be something that we'll see more often. With droughts and fires, it's a little bit more complex, because there you also have the rainfall playing into the picture. And with rainfall, if we look at Europe, for instance, there is not necessarily a clear trend if rainfall is increasing or decreasing. So if we have the combination of warm temperatures but average rainfall, then we might not see a drought, whereas what we've seen in the last 3 months, or more or less 3 months since May.
But the fact that this is happening all at the same time in the different parts of the world at the same time, this is alarming for people. So how long do we expect this to continue, or is this part of a cycle?
Well, so it depends a little bit on what you look at. I think if we look at the globe, we have to always stress there's a lot of variability in the system. So if we look at earlier months during the year, we had quite a lot of cold events in Europe. So from month to month, we will see different things happening. When we look at just the very short term, so the next couple of days, as you said earlier in the program, there are forecasts for these high temperatures to remain. But that's...
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much for that, Freya Vanberg from the European Union's Earth Observation Program, Copernicus. Thanks. Well, with the prolonged heat and drought, summer harvests across Europe are expected to suffer, with wheat output across the EU predicted to shrink. Poland and Latvia have already declared the harvest a natural disaster. Well, joining us now is Guy Smith, the Deputy President of the UK National Farmers Union. Thank you for joining us on the program. We saw from the scientific part of this, but what about the impact on people, especially farmers? What has that been like?
Well, we're just harvesting the crops we sow in the autumn at the moment. They don't seem to be significantly impacted. They're down about 20-25%. We think they've been saved by the fact that this drought comes on the back of a wet period in the spring and the winter. But there is concern about those crops that were sown in the spring. Because ironically, they were sown in bad conditions because of the wet at the time, and then they've barely experienced rainfall since. And we expect those yields to be halved from what would be normal And then crops like vegetables, which are reliant on irrigation even in normal years. The problem there is that the reservoirs of water that farmers use on their farms are running dry. And on this farm, we don't think we're going to be able to irrigate potatoes beyond next week. And that will really start to impact on both quality and yield quantity.
It was a spectacular sight that dazzled stargazers across the world. A total lunar eclipse, the longest of the century. For more than 100 minutes, the blood moon bathed the night skies with its red glow, captivating Greek gods and ordinary mortals. From Australia,
it's a very surreal, lovely experience,
to Cairo.
But I've seen the solar eclipse, never the lunar eclipse. It's very, very good.
One Egyptian wedding party celebrating under the moonlight. It was the night of the red moon and the red planet. Mars was closest to the Earth and brightest in 15 years. For centuries, the blood moon was associated with danger or bad omens, but the color is a trick of the sunlight refracted through the atmosphere. Lunar eclipses happen when the sun, moon, and Earth are in perfect alignment, and the Earth casts a shadow over the moon. And if you were on the moon, you'd see the sun set behind the Earth. British stargazers were out of luck with clouds blocking the view, but the celestial choreography was on full display across Europe, Africa, and Asia. A memorable glimpse of our own planet's shadow.
Chester County, a night out on the town turned into a scary ordeal for several people. They were inside a restaurant when they became trapped by a flash flood. Eyewitness News reporter Shantae Lands spoke to two men who had to be rescued from the rising waters, and she joins us now live from West Marlboro Township. Shantae.
Well, Jessica, it's sunny right now, but that has not always been the case. It's been raining off and on all day here. This restaurant parking lot was completely underwater. In fact, the current was strong enough to lift this dumpster off its base and carry it into a nearby road.
Pretty wild, isn't it? Never seen anything like this before. We realized very quickly we were surrounded on all sides by raging floodwater.
Mike Rothwell of East Norriton was on a double date at Whip Tavern in West Marlboro Sunday night when flash flooding engulfed the western side of Chester County.
One of the servers came out and said they needed to close down the restaurant. So we all kind of looked at each other really confused. And at that point, we realized everyone else had kind of gotten up and was peering out the window.
Rothwell recorded on Facebook what he saw inside before walking outside to Chatham Road. Fire crews say at least 25 people had to be rescued.
I'm driving along, and the next thing you know, boom, I'm stuck in 5-6 feet of water.
Jake Royal of Coatesville was inside one of about a handful of stranded cars saved by rescue teams.
They were very calm, gave me a life preserver jacket, and, they basically just walked me out. So, I didn't have to swim, but the way that water was going, it just seemed like it was getting higher and higher. But I'm just happy to be safe.
I just, obviously want to thank the crews that came out to rescue us. It was quite the response.
In my 13 years in Pomerland, I've never heard of that. I was speaking to a lot of residents, roadmasters, supervisors of West Marlboro Township, and in 40-some years, they've never seen water like that in West Marlboro. So to do that is a feat that all the volunteers and the career staff on the ambulance should be very proud of.
Good evening, I'm Jeff Glore, and we're going to begin with the extreme, potentially dangerous weather affecting big portions of the country this week. Excessive heat warnings are up across the West, the areas you see here in red and orange. Temperatures today reached 111 degrees in Waco, Texas, 112 in Phoenix, Arizona, and 119 in Palm Springs, California. It is expected to be even hotter tomorrow. The heat is making the battle against California wildfires all the more difficult. In the east, flood watches and warnings are up from the Carolinas all the way to New York State. Flooding has already hit Pennsylvania, swamping streets. Some did have to be rescued from their homes. Tony DeCopel is in Lebanon, PA tonight. Tony?
Well, Jeff, what a weekend and what a Monday. A powerful coastal storm has been pounding the Northeast and the Mid-Atlantic, bringing absolute downpours like this one. And now that storm is stalled, lashing Pennsylvania and New York with rain like you're seeing here. In nearby Schuylkill County, roads turned into rivers and first responders had to dive into action, making several rescues. In some areas, the floodwater rose so quickly it nearly went above the roof of cars, forcing stalled drivers onto their own hoods in search of higher ground. And there is no expectation that this is going to let up anytime soon. It follows a weekend of absolute downpours. And according to the National Weather Service, this is going to continue, this stalled heavy rain pattern throughout the Northeast through midweek or even the end of the week.
And in other parts of the world and in this country today, a record-setting storm system will deliver another day of wet weather for tens of millions of people on the East Coast. This rain is no joke. Heavy rains flooded roads and parking lots in Maryland yesterday. Baltimore is having its second wettest month on record. The floodwaters swamped homes in Pennsylvania. Residents there face the threat of even more rain today.
Parts of Pennsylvania have had more than 15 inches of rain since the storms began 6 days ago. Baltimore and the surrounding area are under flood warnings today. DeMarco Morgan is in hard-hit Hershey, Pennsylvania. DeMarco, good morning.
Good morning, guys. Believe it or not, this is a road right here behind me that leads to a subdivision called Union Deposit. Now, many of those homes are covered in parts of that area are covered in water there. Emergency management says they have conducted 36 rescues in 5 of the hardest hit counties. And Pennsylvania's Governor Tom Wolf says he will tour Schuylkill County. That's an area that suffered significant damage.
Parts of Pennsylvania remain underwater as a relentless storm offers no rest for waterlogged residents. Pennsylvania's Department of Transportation says 97 roads were closed as of Wednesday afternoon. Views from high above show the pockets of flooding and swollen waterways.
I was surprised how quick the creek came up, and I'm just hoping it goes down enough to absorb the next storm that's coming in.
Hershey Park remains closed today due to the weather impact on roads and bridges leading into the park. Just north, Knoble's amusement park also shut down after floodwaters rushed into the complex.
As soon as we get one thing cleaned up, it seems like something else goes down.
In Baltimore County, Maryland, a break from the rain means a rush to clean up. Crews cut apart massive trees that came loose from the soaked ground. And some of the crest gates of the Conowingo Dam were open to reduce water levels. Heavy rain pushed through the ceiling of this restaurant in Arlington, Virginia. No one was hurt. Rescue crews in nearby Washington, D.C. were called when floodwaters washed this mail truck off the road.
It was a river. It was a river back here. But this definitely has put a damper on things.
In North Carolina's Outer Banks, they've even started pumping the water out of the roadway and into the ocean in an effort to reduce the flooding.
Millions are on high alert as dangerous flooding threatens communities up and down the East Coast. Wet weather is washing out roads across Maryland and forcing evacuations. Rescuers were called to save children on this stranded school bus.
It doesn't take much water to, even less than that, will start to make a vehicle hard to control. So that's why we say if you can't see the roadway because of the water, turn around and go back a different direction.
In Pennsylvania, more dangerous road conditions and bridges like this swept away. Just outside of Washington, D.C.
This vehicle was almost completely swallowed up by the creek here in Annandale. We are told that the driver actually got out on their own.
And one woman died after a tree crashed down on this home.
Obviously, with all the rain and the past couple of days, things of that nature, the roots of these trees have really loosened up.
Out west in Santa Fe, New Mexico, drivers had to be rescued from their cars. In Durango, Colorado, heavy rain and mudslides closed this highway. And over the next few days, more rain is expected here and on the East Coast, leaving communities bracing for even more emergencies.
水とか氾濫、河川の氾濫とか、そういう浸水とかですね、崖崩れがあるような方はもうちょっと暗くなってしまったんで今からあれなんですけど、目に避難をということで呼びかけさせていただいておりますけども、それから今はメールとかですね、結構呼びかけもしていただいてます。
Good evening. A powerful earthquake has rocked Indonesia's Lombok Island, killing at least 14 people and injuring dozens more. The 6.4 magnitude quake sent locals and tourists running in panic, with tremors felt in the popular tourist spot of Bali.
Harrowing scenes on Indonesia's Lombok Island. Injured survivors clamour at a makeshift medical site, their town clinic just metres away, in ruins, after a 6.4 magnitude earthquake rocked the holiday island before 6 a.m. this morning, killing more than a dozen people, injuring dozens more. Homes and buildings destroyed, most of the casualties caused by falling slabs of concrete. Authorities still searching collapsed homes, looking for more victims. Tourists gathering at Lombok Port, desperate to get on a ferry back to Bali. Strong tremors felt there too.
The bed was actually moving and shaking, the windows were shaking, and Mummy said we might have to get ready to go underneath the desk.
Like my whole bed was moving so much. I could hear it going banging against the back of this. It felt like my bed was going to fall through the roof. I was that scared.
I had a look out the window here at the pool, and it's almost like we had a wave pool out the back.
So far, there's been no reports of injuries or damage in Bali.
Everyone was standing out there very worried and concerned. I think we're all just grateful at the moment that it didn't escalate into anything worse.
11 powerful aftershocks were felt in the 40 minutes that followed, but there's been no tsunami alert. East Lombok, the hardest hit, along with popular trekking destination Mount Rinjani National Park, shut down after reports of a large landslide.
Hopefully flights unaffected in and out of Bali. We're due to leave on Thursday, so fingers crossed we get out safe.
And a state of emergency has been declared with a big disaster operation underway. Jerry Damasi, what's the advice for holidaymakers to the area?
Well, Alice, we can tell you that flights in and out of Bali are still operating, and it appears that Lombok Airport is also unaffected. Earthquakes in Indonesia are not uncommon, so the travel advice from DFAT remains unchanged since July 20. That is, exercise a high degree of caution. So far, the Australian Consulate General says no Australians are known to have been directly affected by the earthquake, but they are on standby to offer humanitarian support if requested. Travellers who plan to visit Lombok in the near future are being urged to double-check their accommodation and travel plans, and authorities say the number of casualties is expected to rise, unfortunately, as more information comes across from the island. Alice?
Certainly not good news. Thank you, Jerry.
Around 700 trekkers headed down Mount Rinjani a day after a powerful earthquake shook Indonesia's tourist island of Lombok. They'd been stranded on the slopes of the volcano at the time of the quake. The death toll from the 6.4 magnitude quake stood at 16 on Monday. Lombok is east of Jakarta and Bali and is one of the lesser-known islands of Indonesia, but is known for its beaches and surfing and, of course, the volcano. The Mount Rinjani National Park organised rescue parties who went to help clear debris from landslides for the climbers to safely return, and a helicopter dropped supplies and looked for those still trapped. Officials say there were more than 120 aftershocks which followed the initial quake. Hundreds of people are injured and homes are completely destroyed. Survivors are receiving medical treatment and hundreds of blankets, tents, food and water are being distributed.
Ini apa nih? Hah? Ini korban warga Malaysia. Warga Malaysia. Ada sebanyak 18 orang warga Malaysia datang ke sini dalam rangka wisata di Gunung Rinjani. Ada mahia sakitan.
Oh, tamu nih. Ada, mahia sakitan.
Waters in Atapo province in southern Laos are slowly receding, but the deluge of mud left behind is hampering search operations. Lower water levels have made some areas inaccessible by boat. Helicopter flights are the only way into some communities. Makeshift shelters are packed with thousands of people who fled their homes. They've lost everything. Homes were swept away and farmland submerged when an auxiliary dam at the Serpian Senam Noi hydroelectric project collapsed on Monday. Parts of neighboring Cambodia are also flooded.
About 5,000 people here in Stung Treng province, right next to the border with Laos, were moved to safety on Tuesday. There have been no reports of missing persons or casualties. Floodwaters have begun to recede, and the water level in the Sekong River, which rose above the danger level several days ago, has begun to fall.
The disaster has revived debate about plans by the Lao government to boost the economy by building dozens of dams to export hydroelectricity to neighboring countries. Why the dam collapsed remains unclear. The Minister of Energy and Mines is quoted as blaming substandard construction. And there are conflicting reports about when damage to the dam was first noticed, raising more questions on whether the order to evacuate villagers from their homes should have been issued earlier.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has made sure that Russian President Vladimir Putin knows where Israel's red lines are in Syria. And one of them is the Golan Heights, where Syrian jets are moving way too close for Israel's comfort.
Our air defense system identified a Syrian Air Force jet that took off from the T4 Syrian Air Force Base and penetrated Israeli airspace. This is a gross violation of the 1974 Separation of Forces Agreement with Syria. I have reiterated and made clear that we will not accept any such violation.
Israel is concerned about Iranian-backed forces in Syria and wants Russia to keep both Syria and Iran, two clear enemies of Israel, far away from the Golan border. Russia sent its top general to Jerusalem this week for still more negotiations. The Syrian pilot was reported killed in Tuesday's incident, a casualty of Syria's move to oust rebel Sunnis from the Golan.
It's the strongest message so far from the current administration. President Trump demands Turkey to release Pastor Andrew Brunson now. Vice President Mike Pence echoed the demand at the first ever ministerial summit to advance religious freedom.
To President Erdogan and the Turkish government, I have a message on behalf of the President of the United States of America. Release Pastor Andrew Brunson now, or be prepared to face the consequences.
President Trump spelled out the consequences in his recent tweet. The United States will impose large sanctions on Turkey for their long-term detainment of Pastor Andrew Brunson, a great Christian, family man, and wonderful human being. Turkish authorities arrested Brunson in 2016 on charges he helped plan a failed coup. The 50-year-old pastor faces up to 35 years in prison. Wednesday, a court ordered Brunson taken from prison and placed on house arrest. The vice president says that's not good enough.
Pastor Andrew Brunson is an innocent man. There is no credible evidence against him. I know that his faith will sustain him, but it shouldn't have to. Pastor Andrew Brunson deserves to be free.